So I want to have a conversation with you this afternoon about power. Not economic power or political power or even your own personal power, but electrical power. Electrical power? 3:30, dark room, better get a coffee. But wait a minute. I want to advance a provocative idea. My contention is that the whole ecosystem of how power is produced, distributed, and consumed is headed for the dustbin in large swaths of the world. We take power for granted. It's plentiful and cheap. Chances are you'll leave this afternoon, you'll go to your home or your hotel, you'll instinctively reach to the left, flip a switch, maybe to the right. The lights will come on. You'll take your cell phone out of your pocket or your purse, you'll plug it in, charge it up. Take your laptop out of your bag, plug it in, charge it up. Download your email, see if there's anything important. Go to the fridge, get a cold drink. But what if, in your world, none of those things were possible? Would you be who you are today? Would you be able to do the work you do? We don't think about energy because we don't need to. But access to energy is fundamental to economic development and to the realization of human potential. Virtually anything productive that we want to do requires power. It enables us to work, to study, to create opportunities for ourselves. Empowers us to operate businesses, use cell phones, access the internet, download our emails. The things that drive personal freedom and choice, and frankly, that drive entire economies, it all takes power. But today, more than 1 billion people around the world don't have access to modern power. And as a result, they're trapped in poverty. They're trapped. No amount of aid, subsidy, charity will get them out. There's no escape. Hundreds of millions of children can't study. Tens of millions of shopkeepers have to close their shops early. Tens of thousands of young, expecting mothers every year deliver their first child in the dark. Thousands of doctors try to treat their patients by candlelight. For most of us, candlelight's romantic. But what if that's all you had to work by? Ask yourself, would you be who you are today if when you were a child, you studied by candlelight? Would you be able to be who you are today in this room, doing the work that you do, if all you had to work by was a kerosene lantern? Don't be ridiculous, you'd say. Of course not. And yet, that's how a huge portion of humanity lives day to day. And the vast majority of people who can't access modern power live in very remote rural areas, and that complicates matters significantly. The distances are vast, population density is low, there are no power plants, no power lines, there is no utility, there is no grid. So people do what they must. They need to power their lives. So they use whatever's available, and usually that's kerosene or diesel. But these alternatives are terrible. They're dangerous, expensive, environmentally unsustainable. I took an Uber today. Maybe you did too. We live in an age where multi-billion-dollar businesses are cell phone apps. I can hail a fancy car from my phone, get to my destination, and not even have to fumble with my wallet. Awesome. But can we figure out how to get reliable, affordable power to 1 billion people in the developing world who are just trying to power themselves out of poverty? Really? If I were to ask you what you think of when I say we need more power, if you're like most people, you probably think of what you know. You know, the traditional grid. Big power plants, grid distribution, power lines, utilities. And you wouldn't be alone. Even the energy experts and energy ministers that I talk to all around the world, they say the same thing. We need to build the grid. We need to extend the grid, reach more people, build more plants, run more power lines. And for good reason. Because in urban areas, the grid makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Dense population, big numbers, short transmission distances, low transmission losses. Makes a ton of sense. But there's a reason there's no grid in rural areas. It doesn't make any sense. Power plants and transmission lines are expensive. In rural areas, people live far away from the power plant. They live far apart. There's too much distance and too few numbers, too few paying customers. It's math. The economics don't work. They never have. The grid's not coming. In fact, the experts say it'll take $700 billion in 20 years to build out the grid to reach these people. Now there's a plan to get excited about. Spend the equivalent of the GDP of sub-Saharan Africa and waste the productive human potential of 1 billion people for a generation. Awesome. But wait, there's more. It's not happening. Governments don't have the money, and private investors aren't stepping in to fill the gap. But power is essential. So what if we ignored the inefficiency, overcame the financial constraints, figured out a way to mobilize the capital, and just extended the grid? What would that look like? Funnily enough, over the last 25 years or so, there's been a large-scale experiment underway to do just that. Power at any cost. That experiment's been going on in China, and the results are in. The power grid as we know it today isn't going to solve the problem of energy poverty in the developing world. In these markets, the power grid of the future is no grid, or a radically different kind of grid than anything we've imagined before. But wait a minute. Isn't there some other kind of grid? The mobile network, sort of, that exists in these places? Interesting. It already reaches more than 500 million people that we need to reach with modern power. And frankly, it's the only infrastructure that actually exists in most rural places in the developing world. Is there some way to leverage that? What if we built a new kind of grid? A mobile-enabled, distributed grid. Human-scale power solutions, versatile, untethered, that gave people the freedom to buy the power they need, when and where they need it. What if we were to leverage the only infrastructure that actually works in the developing world, the mobile infrastructure, and use that to figure out how to deliver power to people affordably and profitably? These customers don't want our help. They don't need handouts, aid, subsidies to escape poverty. They just need to be able to reliably and affordably buy power their lives. If they have that, our experience has been they'll figure the rest out just fine on their own. At scale, this could enable hundreds of millions of people to live more productive lives and for their children to have a better life than they've had. And isn't that what we all want for ourselves and for our families? Today, we can deliver energy access anywhere there's cell phone coverage. The power system technology exists. It's been proven to be robust and reliable at commercial scale. One company we know of doing this, d.light, has sold, but by no means the only, has sold hundreds of thousands of small-scale solar power systems in Africa, Latin America, and India, across several different utility and regulatory environments, very diverse mobile network operating and payment systems ecosystems. The technology risk has been removed. it works. And while technology will continue to improve, we actually think that what's going to drive mass adoption is not technology innovation, but business model innovation, new go-to-market strategies, new kinds of partnerships with mobile network operators, telecom companies, traditional utilities, and yes, even governments, acting in their own self-interest to profitably serve the customers and economies they're committed to. Let's let history be our guide. 15 years ago, mobile phone penetration in Africa was in single digits. Look at it today. And while the prospects for conventional approaches to electrification are not promising, a mobile-enabled distributed grid, combined with innovative new partnerships and business models, can leapfrog conventional power lines in the same way cell phones leapfrogged landlines, and create a curve of energy access that looks more like this, enabling hundreds of millions of people to power their own lives, put themselves out of a path, out of poverty, and into a better life, and reach their own economic and human potential. And instead of spending $700 billion in 20 years extending the grid, a mobile-enabled distributed grid could deliver power for all for $70 billion in a little over a decade. That's a tenth of the cost and half the time. Universal energy access doesn't have to wait. The power customers of the future are already here and ready to buy. They don't need aid. They don't need subsidy. They just need to be able to reliably buy affordable power, how and when they want to. They'll take care of the rest on their own. And the power grid of the future is already here. It's a mobile-enabled distributed grid, but we need to scale it. And that means removing some pretty big obstacles. Investors like Acumen are pivotal to helping us make that happen, but we all have a role to play. If you're interested in learning more, I'd invite you to go to powerforall.com. Thank you very much.